upcoming fall sports season. Like I said, August 24th was the date that the Florida High School Athletic Association, they're allowing us to proceed on that date, but it's not required. It is just the first date that we can. So lots of discussion this morning. We had some medical experts from our local community that were on the call that provided some very valuable information to our coaches, to our athletic directors, to our principals that help guide our decisions and our discussion. That was, of course, the main topic of our discussion was safety, the safety of our student athletes and our coaches. What can we do to ensure that they're safe when we do decide to proceed with athletic competition here in Bay County? And that's always been a top priority, and it will continue to be. We're very fortunate, like I said, to have the support of our local medical community, to have that input, and it's going to be really important as we move forward. With the flexibility given by the Florida High School Athletic Association, we have agreed here in Bay District Schools, our principals, our athletic directors, our district administration we have agreed that we need to delay our start by 2 weeks to allow many things. One, to make sure we have the proper protocols in place to train our staff, our coaches, on the proper protocols, things to look for, to make sure that we're keeping our student athletes and our coaches safe. We also need to focus on the start of school year. We're starting school Thursday, and our principals, our administration, and even our coaches need to be focused on our primary purpose, and that is to educate students. And so we're going to focus on that, and then we'll shift into some planning for athletics as we get the school year underway. So that's where we stand at this time. We'll use this additional time, like I said, to train our coaches. We're going to have some training that our medical community is going to provide to our coaches, and I think it's going to be very beneficial, give them a level of comfort, and it should also give our parents some comfort as they make a decision if they're going to allow their student athletes to participate in athletics this fall. So we want to be able to provide them with some information as well. We're going to use that little bit of buffer time to provide them with some information. So the first official date of fall practice will be September the 7th. That is Labor Day, I believe. So some of the schools may select to start on that date, or they may wait until the 8th, but that will be the first official date of fall practice for Bay District schools. With that, I will take some questions if you have any.
First date for official regular season games would be?
That is yet to be determined, and I'll let Kirk talk to a little bit about that. It has to do with the scheduling process, and as soon as our coaches are prepared to start putting their schedules together or piece them back together, then we will have that official date. But right now, with some school districts electing to play all games within their individual county and not allowing outside travel, that is going to impact some of our schools, and we know that. So we're going to have to make some adjustments, and we'll just have to see how all that shakes out.
I know when we talked to a few high school coaches in the area, they said they wanted a little bit more time than the FHSA was giving them, so
right.
That's kind of coincides with this decision. How important is it to also get the athletes acclimated? School coming back, sports
Sure.
coming back, they also have to get acclimated to, all the other dangers that football provides, right? I mean, did that go into the decision as well?
Absolutely. We did not see the need to rush back into full-blown competition. Many of our student athletes have been conditioning and participating in workouts, but there's a big difference between conditioning and actually preparing and practicing to compete. We did not want to put too much on our student athletes too fast. They do need to get acclimated to the new normal when it comes to school. Things are going to be different in our school facilities. So that needs to be their priority. Get off to a good start with the school year, and then we'll start working on athletics. And we do know how important athletics and extracurriculars are to our student athletes, no doubt. It's very important to our families, our parents, our entire community. And we want that to happen, and it will happen, but we want to make sure it's safe and we do it the right way.
Just specifically related to football, the original start was 24th, and the first allowable regular pretty only about 4 or 5 days after the first full contact football practice. How much was that considered? How much will that sort of determine when you guys do pick a first official regular season day?
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I was having a hard time.
The way they allow was for the 24th start.
Mhm.
The first regular season games would have been 4th, and that would have been really like only 4 or 5 days after the first allowable full contact pads start. How much was that considered? How much will that factor into when you determine the first regular season games will be?
Yeah, I think that will definitely be factored in. That's not a lot of time to prepare, especially when you consider that some of our student athletes have not been as active as normal during the summer months. We need to ensure that they are in playing shape before we put them into competition. And that time frame that was given by the FHSAA, we just didn't feel like it was adequate for our student athletes to be prepared for competition. And so sure, that did play into the decision, and I think it's going to play into the decision of a lot of school districts around our area.
Just so you could end up deciding that it'll be 3 weeks, just how that be 3 weeks after the first, the fall practice match is allowed. That's something you guys would consider?
Potentially, yeah.
So how, with different counties all kind of starting at different times, how big of a concern is that for scheduling and kind of getting the same amount of games across all these counties when everyone's kind of starting at different times?
It's going to take a lot of collaboration between the county athletic directors, and I know that I'm going to allow our county athletic director to speak here in a few minutes if you have some questions for him. But he will be working with the local school district athletic directors for their counties in the coming days to start mapping that out, to see what that looks like. It's going to be a real challenge. It really is, to get in as many games as we possibly can before the state series. Do you opt into the state series? There's also some allowance by the FHSAA to go beyond the state series. So there's a lot of considerations. We have a lot of things to work out, but we will, and we just want the best for our student athletes and make sure that they're safe. That's the biggest thing.
So just to clarify, so far it's just now you're onto the scheduling portion of things. We're to figure out when the first games will be for football, for volleyball, all those fall sports. You're just kind of, it's TBA at this point, right?
When it comes to scheduling, I would say that is the case, yes. We do know that we're going to be able to start fall practice, start preparing for competitive competition games on the 7th. When we're able to start, or when we have that actual first competitive situation, that's TBA. We'll let you know.
Are teams still allowed to condition in the time being? I know some
Yes.
teams still want to continue with that process of conditioning their athletes.
We will continue to follow the same safety guidelines that we have throughout the summer. We're still in phase 2 of our safety guidelines. They're posted on our district website if anyone is interested in checking that out. But we will continue to follow that until we get to the point where we can start fall practice.
Obviously, we've seen some other states where schools started back. They've had some issues with outbreaks. How much was that a factor? And just want to see how things go with actually kids getting back in school before you have to decide to let people start playing.
That was a big factor. We certainly want to see how things are going in school after we have all of our students on campus, the students that will be returning. We want to see how that plays out, how that works, how well that goes. We're anticipating a good start. We think we have a very good plan. There are a lot of uncertainties when it comes to this pandemic, and we want to make sure that we're as safe as possible and that we don't rush into things that's just unnecessary.
That's right. So he still sell the option to distance, not be brick and mortar students, right? Is that the option to do distance learning when I start back, or they'll have to be back on campus?
There are options. They can either do distance learning or brick and mortar. Yes.
And so this is, obviously a pretty big decision to, kind of move all the parts around and
Sure.
move the physical start date of practice back. So kind of, and you mentioned it a little bit at the start, kind of who all is involved, or who all was involved in this decision making process?
Well, certainly Superintendent Husfeldt was involved, but he essentially left it up to the principals and the athletic directors to make the ultimate decision. We provided guidance, like I said, from the medical community. We gave them as much information as we could, but ultimately they made that decision. What was best, they felt was best for their student athletes, for their schools, for the operation of their schools, and they felt that this 2-week delay would be best to make sure that they got off to a good, smooth start in all aspects, with school as well as with athletics.
Can you talk about that guidance from the medical professionals, who that was coming from, and what was the details about that?
There were a number of medical professionals that provided some guidance to our administrators and through local health department, as well as some private physicians in our community that work with us closely through sports medicine as well as our trainers. And they all provided feedback when it comes to things to look out for, things that we need to pay close attention to, and some safety measures that we need to ensure that are in place.
What was their recommendation as far as like when you guys should start? Did they recommend that you guys delay? Is that something you guys heard?
They were very supportive of the 2-week delay, that we'll see how school gets started and make sure that our protocols that we have in place there are working well, and if we need to make some adjustments anywhere, that we can do that, and put that in place for athletics as well.
Was it supportive amongst athletic directors and the principals? Were they also like, yes, this is what we're going to go with? Was there any pushback from them? Or
None whatsoever. They were very much on board, and I think you mentioned earlier that you had heard from several coaches that they would fully support a little delay to the start of the season, just to make sure everything's in order and in place. And so everything that we heard from our coaches and ADs this morning was very much in support of this plan.
Was there concern about the state series in terms of starting later and how it would affect them? Was that something?
Very little discussion on the state series this morning. I think that's something that we'll get into a little bit deeper as we get into scheduling. I know that our coaches want to compete on the state level in playoffs and potentially compete for a state championship. Right now, I think our coaches are excited that we have a plan to get back into action, period. And so I think that'll be the next hurdle that we have to cross is to make sure that we're putting ourselves in a position that we can get the correct number of games in prior to the state series, and that we're healthy and the students are safe, and that's an option for us.
No winter and spring still scheduled to go as normal?
As of now, everything is scheduled as planned.
Cool. Think I'm good.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions for Coach Harrell?
Yeah.
Come on up, Kurt.
We'll ask some questions.
You asked him all tough questions.
I know. I was like, we can ask all the easy ones now. No.
It's softball.
Yeah, right.
No, we'll be good.
Okay.
Oh, let me adjust you. Okay. Are you good?
Yep.
You all good?
Yeah, so I guess, we asked about, now the scheduling process starts.
Yes.
And I know that that's going to be the easiest thing in the world for you guys.
No,
to
it's
do.
not.
Right. But yeah, so just kind of walk me through, now that you have at least a fall practice start date, kind of what are the next steps now to get schedules in place? for
Yeah,
fall?
so now that we have a start date, now it's going back and looking at our original schedules, contacting schools who were on our original schedules, seeing what their counties have decided, seeing where we piece things together. Football probably the hardest to work out, but there's a lot of schools following a lot of different schedules, and a lot of people had openings where they didn't before. So it's just going to take a little bit of time to piece the schedule together.
Are you concerned with the, other counties still have yet to decide some of these things? I mean, obviously this decision for us came out Monday, but some counties I've heard, as far as Pensacola, some in Tallahassee are still making decisions about when they would like to start. How difficult is it now even trying to figure out what they're doing and piecing those puzzles together? I know we have a lot of teams that play over in Pensacola, over in Tallahassee, with news coming out about them deciding to go county only or changing their schedule. How much more difficult does that make it for you guys?
Yeah, well, we were hoping in the next couple of days that most of the counties in our area will announce their begin date for practice and for competitions. So probably in the next few days we'll know pretty much what all the counties are doing, and begin to work with each other to work out any openings or changes that would need to take place in the schedule.
I asked Josh this kind of question just about football specifically, about when it was scheduled to start regular season games, how close that will be coming after the start of practice. How much much was that a factor for you? And what kind of feedback, getting feedback from coaches about being concerned about that element, that sort of physical safety element of it?
If you're referring to the football's first allowable contest date, currently the FHSA came out last Friday saying that you would basically play a football game after 2 weeks of practice, with pads being on that first Monday. The coaches that I've talked to so far in the county, and I haven't talked to them all, but they're concerned that they'd be ready it'd be safe to place the kids in competition that second week. Maybe something like a jamboree or a classic with some adjusted schedule. Some coaches have thrown that idea out, but the state has said that second week you can have a full-fledged football game. But our coaches are going to have to look at that. We're going to have some more discussions whether we think that's advisable to do. Certainly after not playing spring football, no contact there, you have a lot of players who have never played football before who are taking on the sport, and to throw them in a game that second week is going to be a real challenge to do. So more than likely that third week.
So you're keeping the option open to making the second week having a jamboree style or then having a regular season?
I would be more supportive of that than a regular season game.
You being an athletic director as well for Rutherford, obviously you were, speaking for the school aspect, for the district aspect.
Right.
What did you hear from your coaches specifically on, maybe things that they would have liked to see, and what were they kind of in support of?
You talking about as far as the first contest
yeah,
day?
yeah, as far
Very
as
concerned about whether we'd be ready to play that second week. And more than likely, we're already looking at the third week for our first game, and just knowing that we need more time to get prepared after this long shutdown.
Is there any discussion about? I know some, Courtney mentioned some counties have gone to like just playing within the county. Was that brought up at all, or has that been on the table?
That has been brought up. We are discussing it. We haven't made those decisions. A lot of it's going to be perhaps of what other counties surrounding us are doing, and they're on our schedule. Of course, there's some counties that are almost as close as maybe some schools within our district. So it may not be as big a factor. And most of our schedules, regular season contests are not that far away. Maybe Tallahassee, Pensacola areas as far as we would schedule. And with those two I know Leon County's announced they're not going out of county. There's discussion in Pensacola, maybe all of that area, but maybe some still haven't made decisions. So it might be a much closer region that we'd be looking at as far as travel.
Speaking about distance learning, kids have the option. If it does get to a point, God forbid, sometimes where you can only do distance learning, would that affect the ability for teams to compete? Would they still be allowed to compete if it was to point distance learning?
As far as distance learning, there's already policies in place that would allow students to participate. We have homeschool students that are already participating with our school system, virtual school students. So as far as that aspect, we could possibly still move forward with athletics even if we were totally virtual. I know some districts are doing that, doing them totally virtual, but still allowing extracurricular activities.
What about bands at games? Are there any?
That's something we're having discussions on. We feel like at least for the home band, there's room to social distance in the stands and to possibly social distance in the performances. So we're hoping that that's still a possibility for us.
What about fans in attendance? Would there be protocol for them, or would it be just whatever?
Bands in attendance? Fans. There's going to be some restrictions. We're going to have to work with local health officials and local governments as far as what the capacity levels are going to be. But I would expect that we're having to reduce some competition, some attendance as we move forward.
But there will be any protocols as far as social distance protocols or mask mandates, things like that?
There are some guidelines that the Florida High School Sports Medical Advisory Committee have put out, some recommendations to follow as far as screening of spectators, and we just got that Friday, so that's something we're still looking at. But I would expect some type of screening possibly take place for spectators who are attending our events.
Okay.
I know Josh said there was limited talk about the state series today, but it is obviously something to think about. I know that a lot of teams here want to compete in that and then are very competitive in those state series. The opt-out date, September 18th. Do you think the decision will be a little closer to that date after, fall practice does start? Maybe if that is a discussion to have, will that be when it is?
And I suspect we're going to leave that school by school to make that decision, not county, the district decision. But I would think most schools were to opt in to the state series. And those AD, I think that's with the state giving some flexibility that you can opt in, and then if you're eliminated, still continue on with the schedule. So after the first round of playoffs, there'd be a lot of schools who maybe have a very small, limited number of games that have taken place, and they may get together and have some additional opportunities for their players. So the only things that is where the state series is being held, what the rates are of affection in those areas, and those kind of travel decisions will still have to be looked at. But I would think to begin with, most schools would probably go ahead and say we'd like to participate, and then maybe look at it as we get closer.
Was there any consideration to rearranging the calendar in terms of when fall happens in spring, et cetera?
There was some discussions early on as far as switching some seasons around, but then when the FHSA went ahead and started fall sports in the state, that made that decision much more difficult as far as finding opponents if we would switch our schedule around after they set theirs.
Oh, yeah,
All right.
yeah, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all coming out,
Yeah.
helping get the word out.
We do too. Sorry, I feel like I need like all the football schedules and volleyball schedules up next to me to be like, how difficult is it gonna be?
All the schedules, all the sports, all the things.
Well, it's like, you know, because you're like trying to think in your head, who's this gonna affect and what teams have some certain things scheduled. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, exactly. Like you're thinking like, wait, what big things does this, you know?
Find another date.